The midday sun scorched the cracked pavement. The smell of exhaust, motor oil, and burnt rubber mingled into a thick, pungent cocktail, the signature scent of Eastburn Street, where no one was rich, no one stood out, but everyone knew how to survive. Riley Quinn knelt on one knee by the curb, sweat soaking through the back of her t-shirt. She gripped a wrench tightly. A long smear of black grease streaked from her temple down to her cheek. Her other hand rummaged through a chipped, paint-flaked toolbox. "Damn it," she muttered, finally pulling out a nearly empty roll of electrical tape, but she didn't give up. The car in front of her was an old sedan, stalled mid-bridge due to a faulty electrical system. The owner, an elderly man, stood on the curb watching her, anxiety written all over his face. "Just give me a few more minutes, sir. I'm almost done," Riley said, flashing a reassuring smile. Moments later, the engine sputtered, then roared back to life, like it had just been given CPR. The old man clapped his hands, effusively thanking her. Riley simply smiled, wiped her sweat with her sleeve, and waved him off. "Keep your money, sir. Just check your fuses more often next time." A 25-year-old woman, living alone in a cramped attic apartment, earning a living by fixing cars on the street. No one knew where Riley had studied or where she came from. All they knew was she could fix anything, from dead scooters to SUVs with electrical faults. No one asked. She never offered. Until that afternoon when a man in a gray suit stepped out of a gleaming Tesla SUV. "Are you Riley Quinn?" he asked, holding out a business card. "And you are?" Riley squinted at the stranger while folding up her toolbox. "I'm the technical assistant at Hart Automotive. We've got a car that's gone down. None of our engineers can figure it out. Someone recommended you." Riley stood, dusting off her hands. "You must be in the wrong place. This is exactly the right place." He handed her the card. "If you can fix it, Hart will compensate you well. And if not, at least it's a shot at some good luck." Riley glanced at the card, then down at her hands, grease-stained, nails broken, calloused. She looked back up, eyes suddenly sharp and cool. "I don't believe in luck, but I believe in skill." The Hart Automotive Garage was located in the upscale industrial zone west of the city, a world entirely unlike the one Riley came from. Everything here gleamed. It was silent, spotless, so pristine it made her feel out of place. The faulty car was a new prototype, a high-speed electric model still in testing. It sat there like a wounded beast, silent in the center of the vast garage. Surrounding it were a dozen engineers in white lab coats debating over charts and technical schematics. And at the center, like a magnet for all attention, stood Aiden Hart. Tall, impeccably built, his face sharp and expressionless. A custom-tailored gray suit, an Eldridge knotted tie without a single crease. His eyes flicked past Riley for a second without lingering. "This is the mechanic you mentioned?" Aiden asked his assistant, his voice as cool as ice water. "Yes, sir." Aiden stepped closer to Riley, towering over her. His gaze swept from her messy bun to the worn-out canvas shoes on her feet. "If you're as smart as they say," he said with a smirk of condescension, "prove it." Riley didn't respond. She walked straight to the car, bent down, and popped the hood. Within minutes, she pinpointed the problem, a microcircuit failure in the thermodynamic control system. A small glitch, but buried in a place no one had thought to check. A secondary loop trimmed in the new design to cut costs, which caused a closed circuit short. She turned, borrowed a thin copper wire from a test bench, pulled a roll of electrical tape from her pocket, and then took out a pencil. "What are you going to do with a pencil?" One engineer chuckled mockingly. "Make a temporary bridge. Graphite's conductive enough to create the resistance I need," Riley replied without looking up. 3 minutes later, she stood. "Try it." She looked at Aiden, nodding toward the driver's seat. A cautious engineer hit the ignition. The car vibrated slightly. Dashboard lights blinked. 1 second. 2. Then the engine purred, smooth and clean, like wind gliding over a lake. The engineers stared in stunned silence. One slapped his forehead. "Unbelievable." Aiden said nothing. He just stood there looking at Riley as if seeing her, really seeing her for the first time. His eyes were no longer cold. They were acknowledging. They were surprised. They were The collapse of his own arrogance? Riley turned away, wiping her hands on a rag, shoulders still squared. I'm not good with words, but I know machines. If you want someone to sugarcoat things, find a smooth talker. If you want someone who can fix what no one else can, I'm here. Aiden smiled no longer in contempt, but intrigued. For the first time in years, he felt someone outside his world could shake everything in it. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Aiden Hart was not easily impressed. He was born into the founding family of Hart Automotive, raised on numbers, strategies, and steel-hard expectations. Every decision he made was planned, verified, and stripped of emotion. But that night, after Riley Quinn brought the prototype car back to life using copper wire, electrical tape, and a pencil, something cracked, just slightly inside him. And he hated that feeling. Aiden's office sat at the very top floor of Hart's headquarters, 4 glass walls overlooking the night-lit city, reflecting the lights like pulsing circuits. He sat behind his desk, laptop open, typing names he knew well, but this time he was looking into someone completely unfamiliar. Riley Quinn. Her background was almost blank. No LinkedIn, no notable projects, no record at any known engineering firm. Then as he dug through archived research papers from top engineering schools, one name flickered like a scratch on a polished mirror. R. Quinn, Semi-Adaptive Drivetrain for High-Speed Electric Vehicles. Dynamic Axial Drive. University of Arlington, 6 years ago. Aiden frowned. The Dynamic Axial Drive was the very foundation of Hart's first electric sports model, released 3 years ago. The design had been purchased from a recent graduate. No one had paid attention to its real origins. He flipped through old articles. One headline stood out. Engineering student accused of plagiarizing senior project. Scholarship revoked, withdraws from school. Riley Quinn, top senior at the University of Arlington, was accused of copying a driveline system design that had been submitted earlier by another group. While the university made no official ruling, Quinn voluntarily withdrew. A photo accompanied the article. Riley in a white lab coat, eyes stubborn as if holding back tears. Aiden stared at the screen for a long time. Something wasn't right. He'd seen plagiarists before, and they didn't look at circuitry like Riley did. They didn't fix engines with pencils. He picked up his phone. Contact Arlington. I want every record on that case, including the accuser. The next day when Aiden walked into the testing garage, Riley was standing among the cars, hair tied high, holding a resistance meter she'd built out of a soda can and an old PCB board. She didn't look up at the sound of his polished dress shoes. Aiden got straight to the point. You studied at Arlington? Yep, Riley replied curtly, still focused on what she was doing. The Dynamic Axial Drive, was it yours? This time she looked up. Her amber eyes met his, calm and unwavering. What are you checking my background before letting me touch anything else in this garage? Aiden didn't deny it. I need to know who's working inside my system. Riley gave a dry, humorless laugh. Then listen carefully, CEO. She folded her tools and stood up straight. Yes, I designed that system, alone, but the team that submitted it before me included Jules Garrett, my ex-boyfriend. He knew I always worked late, alone with no backups. He just had to copy. Aiden said nothing. No defense. No response. Riley continued, her voice quiet but edged with steel. The university didn't investigate thoroughly. I had no one backing me. He did. And I walked away because in this world, truth isn't enough if you don't have power to match. She stared him down, not with anger, but with a cool, forged resolve. But you know what the funniest part is? I still fix cars, even after being tossed out of the field I loved. I don't need your belief. I just need to fix things. Aiden stood silently for a long moment. Then he spoke again, softer this time. Then let's make a deal. Riley raised an eyebrow. 1 week, you work with the Hart Garage tech team. No titles, no commitment. If you prove you're not just lucky, I'll offer you a position that fits your ability. And if I fail, then I'll never speak your name inside Hart Automotive again." The air between them tightened like a steel cable, but Riley didn't flinch. She reached out her hand. 1 week. Aiden shook it, his hand clean, long-fingered, faintly smelling of mint. Hers was rough, calloused, smelling of oil and metal. 2 worlds collided, an arrogant CEO, a discarded girl, and the beginning of a week. That might change both of their lives. The central garage of Hart Automotive was a place where steel, electricity, and ego clashed by the hour. It wasn't just a repair shop, it was the metallic heart of a tech empire. Glass walls gleamed. The factory floor was pristine white. Machinery stood in rigid rows like an operating room for machines. Every step echoed the sharp ring of absolute precision. And into that world, Riley Quinn stepped in like a speck of dust inside a microchip. She wore a faded gray hoodie, her hair tied back with a loose elastic, sleeves rolled up to reveal sun-kissed skin, and smudges of grease still clinging from the morning. No one greeted her. The first eyes to land on her belonged to Brett Lohman, lead engineer of the Electrical Systems Division, tall with hair slicked back like engine oil, hands tucked casually into his lab coat pockets, as if he were born under LED lights and diagnostic scanners. "You're the one the boss brought in?" Brett smirked, letting his gaze rake over Riley like she was a thrift store leftover. "Nope. I'm the ghost of the battery system," Riley replied, crouching to open her toolbox as if he didn't exist. Brett scoffed. Another engineer handed her a thick packet of schematics pages, dense with resistance codes, torquey control circuits, and enough complex data to stump the entire team for 3 weeks. "We figured you'd want a crack at this beast." His tone dripped with sarcasm. Soft chuckles followed from around the garage. Riley didn't respond. She pulled out a chair and sat at a workbench by the glass wall, sunlight flooding the pages in front of her. She carefully traced each diagram, tracking the current from input to output. Her left hand tapped against her chin, while the right marked irregularities with a cheap red pen. No one paid attention. The others continued their team meeting under a cluster of white lights aimed at the vehicle model on display. Only one man watched silently from the upper-level observation room, Aiden Hart. Over an hour later, Riley quietly made her way to the test bay, where the broken-down prototype lay like a starved animal. She knelt beside it, opened the control panel, and pulled out a tiny screwdriver from her hoodie to remove the sensor guard. Her brows furrowed. A torque sensor had been installed backward. Too simple, too stupid, but also too easy to miss because everyone had been buried in software, voltage mapping, and coordination algorithms. No one thought the fault might lie in something physical, a careless install during a night shift. Riley reoriented the connector, swapped in a heat-conductive rubber cover, and used the garage's 3D printer to fabricate a new locking clip precise down to the fraction of a millimeter. When she rebooted the system, the car vibrated gently under her hands. The control lights lit up steadily, without the usual blaring red warning. She slid into the driver's seat and tapped the wheel. "Wake up, buddy." The engine roared, smooth, steady, perfectly aligned. She smiled, nodded to herself, then shut off the car and went to find Brett. "Take it for a spin," Riley said, tossing Brett the key. Her voice carried no arrogance. "You actually fixed it?" He raised an eyebrow. "Try it. Just don't push the throttle too fast. The new circuit needs a few minutes to adapt." Brett stared at her, then turned toward the car. A few others followed, expecting to witness a spectacular failure. But there was no failure. The car surged forward like a recalibrated arrow, smooth, stable, its electric feedback seamless. No growls, no voltage drops. Silence fell across the garage. Only the faint hum of tires echoed through the test corridor. Riley stood by the workbench, calmly retying her hair. When Brett got out of the car, his face was pale. No one said a word. Upstairs, the lights in the observation room stayed on. Aiden didn't move. His eyes never left the woman below. Something felt off, but also too perfect. Why hadn't she asked about salary? Why didn't she care about being dismissed? Why didn't she need validation and yet outperformed everyone trying to earn it? He called Evan his loyal assistant. "Did you get anything from that plagiarism case?" Evan nodded. I contacted Professor Lynn-Ma Riley's advisor at the University of Arlington. He handed Aiden a printed file. He said Riley was the best student in the department. The driveline design she submitted came first, but later, another group led by her ex-boyfriend, Jules Garrett, turned in a project that looked almost identical. No one verified it? Aiden's voice turned sharp. The school declined to investigate. Jules had family influence. Riley had none. She walked away. Aiden said nothing. Riley's voice echoed in his head. I don't need you to believe me. I just fix cars. He had thought she was arrogant. Now he understood it was pain, forged into steel. That evening, as Riley packed up her tools, Aiden appeared, hands in his pockets, voice low. You really don't want anything? No contract, no job title, not even a conversation about compensation? Riley didn't turn around. She wiped her pliers with an oil rag, voice soft. Because I didn't come here for a promotion. Aiden stared at her for a long time. That girl wanted nothing from him, and that made him want to give her everything. Riley chuckled dryly. You think I came here to ask for a job? Number, I came to prove I was never just lucky. And if I believe you? Riley turned, her eyes lit, not with joy, but something sharper, defense. I don't need you to believe me. I need to not fall apart. She bent down, stuffed the rag into her pocket. If you've got nothing else for me, I'm heading out. Aiden didn't stop her, but when the door closed behind her, he stood there, frozen in the middle of the garage for the first time in years, utterly haunted. Not because she fixed the car, but because she needed nothing from him, and yet she was stronger than anyone who had ever tried to impress him. The early summer sun burned down like a magnifying glass pressed against the concrete behind Hart Automotive's test headquarters. Heat shimmered off the pavement, warping the air like a camera lens going out of focus. Engineers were installing monitoring systems along a closed-loop track designed for testing the company's latest high-speed electric vehicle prototype. Riley stood at the edge of the test lane, gloved hands gripping a tablet displaying thermal data. Her hair was tied up high, her hoodie's collar damp with sweat, but her eyes never left the vehicle in the distance, the EV-H7X prototype, the product of 6 months of tireless work in both code and circuitry. A horn blared. The car hissed slightly, then shot forward, gliding smoothly at first. But once it reached 150 kilometers per hour, a thin stream of smoke began to rise from the rear. At first it was white, then pale yellow, and seconds later, thick gray with streaks of red flame. Damn it, smoke! Brett shouted, lunging toward the emergency control panel. Rear battery pack shorting out. Another engineer yelled, shut down power now. Sirens wailed. Engineers backed away. A few scrambled for fire extinguishers. No one was inside the car. But if the battery unit exploded, the entire vehicle and 6 months of progress would go up in flames. Riley didn't think. She ran. Her worn sneakers smacked against the burning hot pavement like metal dropped on a factory floor. Smoke had begun creeping into the control cabin. What the hell is she doing? Stop her! Brett screamed. Riley! A deeper voice rang out behind her, Aiden's, but she had already disappeared into the smoke. She dropped to her knees at the car's nose, flung the hood open. The heat hit her face like a slap. It gripped her throat. Still, her breathing stayed steady. Tier 3 circuit, unstable. Auxiliary joint broken. Current feedback into the core controller, she muttered, hands flying. She pulled out an insulating sleeve, unlatched the secondary battery connector, and yanked a feed wire spark snapped against her gloves. She clenched her jaw, didn't make a sound. With insulated gloves and quick hands, Riley detached the reactive cell and isolated the overheating core. The smoke began to clear, but fire licked at the side of her hoodie. Damn it, she hissed, slapping the flames and scooping dirt from the side of the track to snuff it out. Just as the flames died down, a strong arm yanked her out of the car. Aiden. Before she could react, he pulled her into a tight embrace, voice rough and breaking. Are you out of your damn mind? You just... She gasped, chest pressed against his, heart pounding in sync. Do you even realize it could have exploded? He repeated, eyes wide like a man jolted from a nightmare. Riley shoved him off, coughing hard. She was exhausted, overheated, aching, but she lifted her head and stared at him, defiant as ever. If I hadn't gone in, the car would have exploded, and everything you and your team worked for would have been gone. I saved your company. Again. My company isn't worth your life, Aiden nearly shouted. It wasn't his usual temper. It was fear. Riley froze. In that split second, she saw a completely different Aiden, not the cold CEO behind glass walls, but a man with ragged breath, panic in his eyes and hands that trembled just enough as he tried not to touch her again. You're worth more than any car in this damn garage, he whispered, as if scared to hear his own voice. No one said anything after that. All around them, smoke drifted into the hot summer air, the ground scorched and trembling with leftover voltage. That night, a light rain tapped against the tin roof of the rundown building where Riley lived. She'd just washed her hair and sat brushing it in front of a cracked mirror, wearing an old t-shirt and shorts, when a knock came at the door. She sighed, walked over, and opened it. Aiden Hart stood there soaking wet, holding a large silver metal box. "What happened to you?" she asked, tilting her head. "Nothing," he replied. "I just came to apologize." Riley crossed her arms. "With what?" Aiden opened the case. It revealed a high-end mechanic toolkit. Limited edition, snap-on, ultra-light torque heads, powered screwdrivers, and integrated thermoelectric gauge gear typically reserved for pro race teams. "For you," he said, holding it out. "Not because you risked your life today, but because you're brilliant, and I should have said that long ago." Riley smiled, not a smirk. A real smile, soft, warm, and just a little flustered. "Are you bribing me?" "No," Aiden replied, looking her in the eyes. "I'm learning to treat the people who matter the right way." In that moment, something cracked inside her, not her defenses, not her scars, but something close, like a pressure valve releasing just enough for her to breathe again. "Come in," she said softly. "Pizza's cold, still edible." After that day, a new rhythm slowly took shape at Hart's garage. Riley and Aiden were no longer just the CEO and a temporary mechanic. They were teammates, though no one dared call it that aloud. They had dinner in the garage, sometimes instant noodles, sometimes sandwiches Aiden picked up on the way. Riley played indie music from a beat-up Bluetooth speaker. Aiden would sketch designs on the whiteboard, hair messy, sleeves rolled up. She called him Hart when arguing and Aiden when she needed coffee. He didn't say her name often, but every time he did, there was a brief pause before it, like he was weighing something fragile, holding something careful. One time Riley left her screwdriver on a high shelf. Aiden climbed up to get it for her. She teased, "You climb well. Next time, change the tire." He replied, "If you're the one teaching, I'll learn." It took her a few seconds to glare at him, but her heart had already skipped something strange. They didn't hug, they didn't kiss. There was no need to define it. But among the whirring machines, electric sparks, and the scent of oil, the current between them grew stronger every day. No longer the 12 volts of old engines, but 220 silent, dangerous, and impossible to shut off. That morning, the third floor of Hart Automotive's engineering division was drenched in sunlight. Deep golden rays cut through the clear glass, streaming over cluttered work tables covered in blueprints, wiring, prototype circuits, and a cup of cold coffee left from the night before. Riley sat alone in the east corner of the workshop, her loosely tied hair bun slipping to one side, eyes fixed on a large monitor playing the structural simulation of the latest drivetrain design for the EvolveX project. She tilted her head, squinting. Something felt familiar. She rewound the footage, pausing at the section detailing the torque distribution mechanism per wheel, the way the central differential linked with the auxiliary shaft, the voltage ratio it all matched, line for line. The blueprint she had created 5 years ago in the thesis that got her accused of plagiarism. She remembered every stroke of that drawing, every parameter, because it was her final labor of love before the world turned its back on her. And now that blueprint was being displayed publicly under a new name, Jules Garrett, senior technical lead, the man who had once been her boyfriend, the man who stole her design and her future. The air around her thickened. Riley set down the tablet and stood still for a long while. The garage buzzed with noise tools clinking, Brett's grumbling, hurried footsteps. But inside her, there was only the ringing of old memories. Jules whispering as he logged into her laptop while she dozed off. The disciplinary board reading out her revoked scholarship. Her mother crying on the phone, confused and helpless. "I'm fine," she whispered, barely audible. She sat back down, pulled a red pen from her pocket, and slashed a harsh line across the printout. Then slowly she gathered the papers neatly, precisely. Her hands didn't tremble. There were no tears, only silence. The kind that comes when a machine quietly powers down. Aiden Hart sensed something was wrong, even before his assistant said a word. From the upper-level control room, he looked through the one-way glass and saw Riley packing her things. This wasn't a shift in assignment. She was withdrawing methodically, calmly, like she'd done it many times before. He dropped everything and walked briskly down the corridor, heart beating unevenly. "Riley!" he called out, his voice echoing down the hall. She stopped at the stairwell door. Her jacket hung loosely over one shoulder, toolbox heavy in one hand, hair falling to her shoulders where the hair tie had snapped. She looked like someone who had just stepped out of a storm, not from outside, but from deep within herself. "Where are you going?" Aiden asked, breath catching. "Home," Riley replied, eyes fixed ahead. "Because of the blueprint?" he asked more softly. "I saw it. That design was yours, wasn't it?" Riley smiled faintly, but not the kind of smile he hoped for. It was the kind worn by someone who had long stopped expecting justice. "So what if you saw it, Aiden?" she said steadily. "What now? Are you going to replace Jules with me? Strip his name? Put me on stage to collect a plaque?" He didn't answer. "No one believed me back then, and now I don't need anyone to." Her voice was hoarse. "I've learned to live without defenders, to accept that what was taken won't come back, whether it's a name or the ability to trust." Aiden stepped back, not in fear, but in awe. He used to think Riley was strong because she was stubborn. Now he knew she was strong because she had no one to lean on, nowhere to fall. "I'm not a screw that fits into this system, Aiden," she continued, her voice low and even. "And you know what happens to misfitting screws? They either break off or get replaced." He swallowed hard, then murmured, "Not everyone wants to replace you." "And you?" She looked him dead in the eye. "What will you do about Jules? About a system that shoved me out and still runs like it never did anything wrong?" Aiden inhaled deeply. "I'll break it if it's broken." "Don't promise something you can't keep." She turned to go. But just as her hand touched the stairwell door, something unexpected happened. Aiden pulled her back and hugged her. No words, no explanations. Just a tight embrace, his arms wrapped around her shoulders, holding her like she was the one thing in the world he couldn't afford to lose. His chin rested gently atop her head. His breath hitched as he realized she didn't pull away. She stood still, her body tense at first, then slowly. Her shoulders relaxed. She didn't cry. That wasn't her. But inside something broke. Gently, softly, like a fracture in a high-speed drivetrain. Only someone with the right touch could ever reach it. "I'm not standing with you out of pity," Aiden whispered, voice low and truer than ever. "I'm standing with you because you're right. And for the first time in my life, I want to stand where right is, even if it means going against the company I built." She drew in a deep breath, then gently released his arms, not to run, but to look him in the face. "All right," she nodded. "If you really want to start over, then start with me. But not because I'm a victim, because I'm the best damn engineer you've got." Aiden let out a soft laugh. "Deal." They said nothing more, but both knew everything had changed from that moment forward. That night, Riley didn't leave the garage. She and Aiden sat side by side at the workbench, redrawing her original design circuit by circuit, torque algorithm by torque algorithm. Every curve she had once calculated alone in a dorm room, with peeling walls and a flickering desk lamp. Aiden watched her work, her left hand brushing hair aside, right hand flying across the blueprint like she was composing music. And he understood this wasn't just skill. This was survival. This was soul. Near midnight, she stood and handed him a finished schematic. "This one has encrypted signature tracking," she said. "If anyone tries to steal it again, I'll sue them into the ground." Aiden smiled gently, quietly, like the desk light falling across her cheek. Riley Quinn, he said, you're not a misfitting screw. You're the central shaft, the thing this entire system should turn around. They sat together in the quiet workshop, with nothing but the hum of wind through the window panes and the soft scratch of pen on paper. In a world built from logic, metal, and precision, they had just built something else entirely, a connection unnamed but solid as steel. The gold-embossed envelope lay quietly on the conference table on the 26th floor. Aiden Hart didn't need to open it to know what it was. The National Mobility Technology Competition, an annual event where engineers, inventors, and major corporations gathered to showcase the future of intelligent mobility. This year, the organizers had chosen an unusual theme: When Mechanics Have a Soul. Aiden read the line again, but instead of thinking of robots or flying cars, his mind conjured the image of Riley Quinn leaning over a welding rig, hair messy, eyes locked in the kind of focus that shut out the rest of the world. He took the envelope down to the third floor, where she was adjusting a new wheel axis model by hand, without sensors or laser guides. This year's competition, he said as he approached, allows AI, automated sensors, virtual design, but the theme calls for something more human, more real. She didn't look up. He placed the invitation in front of her. You should lead this. Silence. Riley continued tightening a bolt, the motion crisp, precise. No, she said finally, short and ice cold. Why not? Aiden asked, though he already suspected the reason. Because I don't do rematches, she replied, finally looking up, her gaze sharp. I'm not interested in revenge, and I'm definitely not walking back in front of the people who threw me out just to hear them mutter, "Oh, so she's still around." It's not about them, Aiden said, stepping closer. It's about you. They once silenced your voice. This time, you get to speak on your terms. Riley gave a small, dry laugh and set the wrench down. You're good at persuading people, she said, but I have one condition. Anything. No software, no simulations, no optimization algorithms. I build it by hand with my old tools. I want to prove that the things we forgot still matter. Aiden looked at her and something in his eyes shifted. Something serious. Something soft. Then we'll build the most human car at the entire competition. An abandoned garage behind the main workshop was cleared out, painted white, and outfitted with new tube lights. Riley chose it as their base. No air conditioning, no glass partitions, no digital dashboards. Just welding tools, sketch pens, wooden boards, hand-cut steel pipes, and a crooked countdown clock hanging in the corner. On the first day, Riley wheeled in a giant whiteboard and started sketching the model by hand. Clean, vein-like lines, a semi-free pivot axle, mid-wheel torque delivery, an asymmetric drivetrain system. Aiden stood by, stunned, not at the idea itself, but at the speed. Her mind connected mechanical logic like nothing he'd ever seen in any processor. I need raw iron, 20 gauge, no alloys, and weathered flat steel, no polish, she said, still drawing. Used metal? Aiden blinked. Shiny stuff looks nice, but it has no history. I want something that's carried weight like me. He said nothing. Days passed like pressurized wind funneled between two factory rows, hot, suffocating, intense. But inside that garage, something alive began to take shape. Riley worked like an artisan, hands stained with grease, hair tied with a frayed piece of wire. Aiden, who'd meant only to supervise, was soon pulled in like a rookie apprentice. He hand-cut steel, learned basic welding, molded wheels from cast molds under her guidance. That's the first time I've seen you actually sweat, she joked. That's the first time I've seen a woman turn a power drill into a more precise tool than a scalpel, he replied. At night, they ate cup noodles, wiping their mouths with folded schematics. Some nights, Riley fell asleep at the table, caliper still in hand. Aiden would gently cover her with his jacket and keep watch until dawn. Each passing day, the prototype neared completion, not powered by tech, but by something older, belief in machines and human hands. The night before the submission deadline, Riley and Aiden were the last to leave the garage. The moon hung low in a gray sky, casting faint silver light through a dusty window, painting their silhouettes on the wall. They stood before the car matte black, compact, its weld lines still visible, but strong like the sinew of a warrior. Riley wiped her forehead, leaned back against the bench, exhaling. The yellow lamp above illuminated her sunburnt skin, scraped hands, and more than anything, her eyes. Lighter, less burdened, as if a part of her past had finally been unfastened. Aiden sat beside her and handed her a cold bottle of water. She drank, then asked quietly, "Am I crazy?" "Why would you say that?" "Because I'm holding $1 million project, built from old bolts, rough zinc, and scribbled notes." Aiden tilted his head, studying her. "You're not crazy," he said. "You're just putting the soul back into this industry." Riley turned toward him. Their eyes met, and this time, nothing stood between them. No walls, just breath and stillness and something unspoken. He reached out, gently brushed her cheek as if afraid to break something delicate. "You don't have to fix cars forever to prove your worth," he whispered. "You already have it just by being you." She said nothing, but slowly she leaned her head against his shoulder. A moment passed. Then she looked up, eyes still bright, but no longer guarded. She tilted her head, and they kissed. Not hurried, not calculated, just an acknowledgement. We walked through the ashes together, and now we're rebuilding, not with steel, but with each other. The next morning, the prototype was complete. The wheels rolled for the first time across the workshop floor, like the heartbeat of something no longer just mechanical. The entire team stood around it, silent. Riley stepped back, arms crossed, watching the car make its first lap. Then she turned to Aiden. He said nothing, just smiled. And in that moment, they didn't need to win. They didn't need applause, because they had achieved the one thing that mattered most. They had stepped out of the shadow of the past together. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. The awards ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of the National Engineering Council. A soaring ceiling stretched above, lined with cool white-blue LED strips reflecting the logos of the biggest tech firms in the country. Rows of seats were filled with investors, technical experts, former professors from top universities, and many familiar faces. Familiar to Riley, but not in a pleasant way. The prototype she, Aiden, and the team had built a raw, stripped-down machine executed with breathtaking precision had stunned the judges. No holograms, no simulations, just pure craftsmanship. Every bolt and weld was done by hand, so meticulously that no one could believe it had been assembled in just 3 weeks. And they won. Not just the Innovation Award, but also the Grand Jury Prize from the Engineering Council, beating out giants backed by cutting-edge AI. Applause thundered like ocean waves as Hart Corporation was announced. Aiden stepped onto the stage polished, composed. He thanked the team, the competition, then turned to the second microphone. "And I want to invite the one behind it, the one who proved that engineering doesn't need technology to have a soul, to join me here. Riley Quinn." The spotlight shifted. The room fell silent. Many heads turned. Riley didn't move. She remained seated near the back row, hands resting on her lap, back straight, her lips curved into the faintest smile, software steady. Aiden looked at her from the stage. Their eyes met. He understood and nodded. "She doesn't need a microphone," he told the crowd. "Her work spoke for her." The entire room stood. Applause erupted again. But Riley remained seated, because for the first time in years, she didn't need to be seen to feel seen. After the ceremony, the crowd thinned, trickling into the backstage lounge. The lights dimmed, voices dropped. Only the sound of shoes clicking on the polished floor remained, mingling with the subtle scent of expensive perfume and chilled air conditioning. Riley walked alone down a long corridor leading toward the rear exit when a voice rose behind her. Still the same, always walking alone, never needing to be noticed. She stopped, turned. Jules Garrett, dark suit, hair slicked back just like before. But this time his eyes held no arrogance, only regret. "I'm not surprised to see you here," Jules said, walking closer. But I didn't think you'd win. You never thought I could win, Riley replied, her voice soft, unshaken. They stood facing each other, the space between them filled with two separate lifetimes, once overlapped, now completely apart. I want to apologize, Jules said, clenching his hands. Back then I was a coward. I did something terrible, and I ran. You took my design, Riley said, not raising her voice. You took the scholarship, the recommendations. You took my faith in this industry. Jules lowered his head. A long silence followed. But there's one thing you didn't take, she continued. The faith I had in myself. That's what brought me here. Jules hesitated. You could come back, he said. Several companies want to recruit you. Even the old university mentioned your name today. You could stand on any stage. No, Riley cut in. I don't need to stand anywhere. I just need to move forward. And I'm choosing not to walk beside you. She smiled not with anger or bitterness, just a smile of full understanding. Good luck, Jules. She turned and walked away. She didn't see Aiden standing at the other end of the corridor, leaning against the frosted glass, having heard everything. When she stepped out to the back lawn, where warm yellow lights cast a glow across the damp grass, Aiden joined her. You saw him? He asked quietly. Yeah, Riley replied. And forgave him? She shook her head. No, she said. I didn't forgive, but I chose not to carry him with me anymore. Aiden looked at her for a long moment, the street lamp light illuminating her face, revealing every trace of exhaustion, the new scratches from welding, the quiet lines near her lips. But all of it made her stronger, more beautiful, more real. He held out his hand, said nothing. She looked at it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. His was warm, hers was cool, but as their fingers intertwined, the temperature evened out. She looked at him for the first time, like she was acknowledging something unspoken. I'm no longer alone. And Aiden, who had never been a man of many words, understood more clearly than anyone. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do isn't forgiveness. It's letting go to keep living. And in that quiet night, where the wind whispered through the lampposts without chilling anyone's bones, Riley Quinn, the woman once crushed by the very industry she loved, finally stepped out of the shadow of her past. Not because she'd won, not because someone said sorry, but because she stood by her own hands. 2 days after the awards ceremony, Riley returned to work as if nothing had happened. She arrived at the garage at 7:15 a.m., earlier than the engineering crew, and immediately began disassembling the prototype's rear wheel to analyze the wear on the new axle. No interviews, no press conferences, no bouquets, no victory dinners. She was as quiet as the day she first arrived at Hartcorp, uninvited but impossible to replace. But up on the 26th floor where the lights never went out and decisions weren't made with pencils, but with numbers, Riley Quinn's name was becoming a commodity. The Hartcorp board of directors, many of whom had never set foot in the engineering workshop, now sat around a glass table, spinning Mont Blanc pens and speaking in low, deliberate tones. She's our new symbol. We should put her on magazine covers. We could link her to the Technology with Heart campaign. Have her sit beside Aiden at the next tech summit, a few photo ops with CNC machines. Add a bit of rags to riches angle. The press will eat it up. Aiden sat at the head of the table, silent, until one young PR executive suggested, we should make a short documentary about her life. Maybe dramatize the betrayal a little. A touch of scandal boosts shares. The fountain pen in Aiden's hand snapped clean in two. Silence fell. Aiden looked up. His voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to send a chill down every spine in the room. If you want to produce entertainment content, go to Netflix. Here we build technology. We don't trade in human beings. Down in the garage, Riley was greasing a bearing when Aiden appeared, still in his suit, but without the tie. He stood still, watching her lean over the workbench, the overhead industrial light catching the strands of her hair like a halo of metal dust. Did you know, he began, at least 4 departments are drafting press packages on you right now. They're calling you the resurrection of mechanical engineering. Riley didn't look up. She just smirked. What's next? A recycled aluminum statue? You deserve to have your story told. No, Her voice was sharper now. I lost control of my story once. I won't let anyone else hold the pen again. Aiden stepped closer. I just thought, if you spoke, others might find strength in it. I wasn't born to be a role model, Riley said, setting the wrench down. I fix cars. I don't need an audience. Aiden said nothing, but his eyes flickered with something more complex, somewhere between frustration and fear. Is it because, he asked quietly, you still haven't forgiven me? Riley looked at him for a long time. You chose not to believe me, she said, not bitter, just honest. And that wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Now you choose to believe me. That's fine. But I don't need that to exist. Then what do you need? Freedom, she said simply. I don't want to be a brand. I don't need to be painted as some hero emerging from the shadows. I've lived in the shadows long enough to know they're not scary. They're just quiet and honest. Aiden left the workshop, but instead of heading back to his office, he went straight to the media floor, to the in-house studio, where most internal interviews were filmed. Call the press, he told the producer. Set up the cameras. I want to make a public statement about the competition. Do you want to mention Ms. Quinn? Number one, I want to tell the truth. 3 hours later, the live stream went out nationwide. Aiden sat alone in a gray leather chair, HeartCorp's logo behind him. No script, no teleprompter. Just his eyes looking straight into the camera. Last week, HeartCorp won the National Mobility Technology Competition, he began. But I'm not here to talk about the achievement. I'm here to talk about the truth. He rested a hand on the table. 6 years ago, a critical drivetrain design was stolen. The person who created it was never credited. She left the industry pushed into the dark. Down on the third floor, Riley was inspecting a circuit panel when the voice from the workshop radio made her freeze. She didn't sue, Aiden's voice continued. She didn't fight back. She didn't seek justice. She just kept fixing cars. He looked directly at the lens. Today, I want to make it clear. Riley Quinn is the reason HeartCorp won. Not because she needs applause, but because she deserves to know she is the reason this system still runs. And if we truly want a future where technology has a heart, then that heart must begin with seeing people clearly. No embellishment, no branding, just recognition. In the garage, Riley stood frozen before the small radio, her hands still oily, a fresh red cut visible on her thumb. She didn't cry right away. She just stood there as if time had momentarily slowed. And then, a single tear traced its way down her cheek, not from pain, not from anger, but because for the first time in years, after surviving cold machines and colder gazes, someone had said her name, and she no longer had to prove it meant something. The next morning, Riley arrived at the garage at her usual time. She wore the same old hoodie, hair tied with the same frayed cable, lunchbox in one hand, personal wrench set in the other. But this time, as she walked in, the engineering team stood in a loose line at the entrance, not stiff, not staged, just waiting. Brett, the first one who ever laughed at her, stepped forward and offered his hand. Miss Quinn, he said genuinely, I saw the CEO's speech yesterday, and I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what I thought, and for not seeing it sooner. Riley looked at him, then took his hand, firm, steady, just like she was. Behind them, Aiden leaned against the wall watching. She turned to him. They said nothing, but her eyes, red-rimmed, yet clear, said everything. Thank you for believing but not glorifying, for seeing me but not turning me into a symbol, for calling me by my name without needing the spotlight. Aiden nodded. He didn't step forward, because he knew. She didn't need protection. She only ever needed to be seen for who she was. 3 weeks after the national competition, an internal investigation was launched at Hart Corporation, but this time not to accuse Riley, but to expose Jules Garrett. After the award ceremony, a few members of the Engineering Council noticed a suspicious overlap between the official design Jules had submitted last year and a nearly identical version currently being used by Archeon Mobility, a European competitor testing a new electric prototype. The investigation started with code snippets, then moved on to file logs, email timestamps, and data exports from Jules's personal laptop. Line by line, the evidence surfaced like a dirty joke no one had dared to laugh at for the past 4 years. Jules hadn't just stolen Riley's design back then. He had sold a refined version of it to a rival company for $1.8 million. That night, a breaking news segment aired on the National Tech Network. Footage showed Jules walking out of HartCorp headquarters, flanked by 2 investigators, his once polished face now clouded with shame. At the bottom of the screen, the ticker read, Jules Garrett suspended from all positions. HartCorp pledges full transparency. Original designer Riley Quinn acknowledged. Aiden found Riley in the voltage testing chamber on the ground floor. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry. She just looked calm, like someone who had finally closed a painful chapter. Feel any lighter? He asked, standing beside her as she knelt under a car. No, she exhaled slowly. Just feels right. Aiden didn't respond. They stood in silence, surrounded by the hum of cooling fans and the flickering lights of electrical monitors. Cheating's not an accident, Aiden, she said at last. It's a choice, just like I once chose silence, and now I choose not to be silent anymore. Aiden looked at her, still smeared with grease, but eyes sharp like steel, heated to the right temperature. There's something else, he said. The University of Arlington sent an invitation. They want you to come back as a lecturer, senior position, private laboratory. Pick your own syllabus. Riley let out a soft laugh, not bitter, just tinged with a gentle, ironic sadness. Funny how fast the world spins. 4 years ago, they called me a plagiarist. Now they want me to teach engineering ethics? Will you turn it down? Aiden asked, though he already knew the answer. Yeah. Why? She looked at him unfiltered, unguarded. Because I'm not going to stand on a podium lecturing rich kids about professional morality when they've never had to choose between their conscience and a hot meal. The following week, Riley converted an empty back room of the Hart Garage into a workshop for underprivileged kids from the surrounding industrial district. No logo, no sponsors, no branded banners with her name. Just a few old wooden tables, budget tools, and a whiteboard where she wrote by hand. Tech workshop for anyone who wants to learn but doesn't know where to start. On the first day, 8 kids showed up. 4 wore no shoes, 2 didn't speak English. One asked, "Do you accept kids who got expelled from school?" Riley replied, "I accept everyone." A week later, there were 15, then 30. Hart engineers began stopping by, at first out of curiosity, then voluntarily, staying to co-teach. One afternoon, Aiden stood by the glass door, watching Riley crouch next to a boy, guiding his hand as he learned to tighten a bolt counterclockwise. She didn't act powerful. She didn't need a microphone. But every word made those kids lift their heads higher. That's when Aiden stepped in. "There's something I still don't get," he said as they stood alone in the empty workshop after class. "Why do you keep turning down what others dream of?" Riley looked up. Her forehead glistened with sweat, her hands dusted with metal shavings. "Because I already have something most people spend their whole lives chasing, without even knowing its name." "What is it?" She smiled, not sarcastic, but warm, like late sunlight through a dusty window pane. "Recognition. Not the kind that comes from titles, not from plaques, but from someone who stands beside me no matter who I am. Someone who once didn't believe, but later chose to." Aiden stepped closer. So close. "And if I told you," he said quietly, "that you're the reason I want to believe in myself again?" She didn't answer with words. She stepped forward, took his hand, and in the middle of that first humble workshop, where the paint was still wet, the floor marked with tiny footprints, the whiteboard still smudged, they kissed. No performance, no titles, not a CEO kissing a mechanic, but 2 people wounded by the system who found each other, not to fix, but to stay. That night, Riley wrote the first line in her new teaching notebook. "No one is nameless if they know who they are." And Aiden, for the first time in years, left the office without a folder. He only brought one thing with him, a lunchbox Riley had packed. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. 1 year later, the city was still buzzing. The downtown intersection was still jammed every morning, and the pulse of digital life still ticked along with every change of the smart traffic lights. But something new had risen just south of the city on the ruins of a long-abandoned industrial park, the Quinn Hart Community Tech Center, a modest 3-story building painted in pale gray blue. No flashy signs, no corporate logos, just one hand-painted line on the front window. Self-learn, self-build, no one left behind. Inside, poor children, high school dropouts, even a few formerly incarcerated folks sat around long wooden tables, learning how to read resistors, 3D print bike frames, or program basic sensor systems. And at the center of it all, amid grease, wires, and laughter, was Riley Quinn, still wearing overalls and work boots, her hands stained with technical ink. She was 8 months pregnant. Her belly was big, but she still knelt beside a 6th grader, helping him connect a battery without short-circuiting the board. One hand on her back, the other sketching a diagram. "See this?" She pointed at the board. "Electricity only flows when we create the right path. Just like people, we have to choose the route that fits who we are." Upstairs, Aiden Hart, who had stepped down from HartCorp's executive leadership, was reviewing a proposal for the Mobile Garage Initiative, a converted truck that would serve as a roving workshop in low-income neighborhoods. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. His tie was nowhere in sight. His hair looked softer, and his smile less guarded. He was still Aiden Hart. But he no longer needed to prove anything, no longer needed to control everything. He had Riley, and a heart that no longer ran cold. The launch event for HartCorp's newest prototype took place not in a 5-star hotel, but in the Quinn Hart courtyard at Aiden's request. Among beat-up school desks, tool bins, and crooked artwork clipped to clotheslines, the crowd gathered. Riley appeared last. No evening gown, no designer coat. She wore blue overalls, a slightly faded white t-shirt, and flats. Her hands still had oil stains. Her belly showed. Her eyes sparkled. There were whispers at first, murmurs. But when she stepped onto the makeshift stage, just steel frames and repurposed wood, the crowd went silent. She adjusted the mic, glanced at no notes, and looked straight into the crowd. "Hi, I'm Riley Quinn, and I'm not a genius." A brief pause, she smiled, then continued. "I was once pushed out of engineering, once called a thief. I used to fix cars on the side of the road to survive. But I never stopped believing in this, that if your hands can still build something, you're not worthless." She raised her hand, a rough, calloused one, with a long scar along her thumb. "The car behind me isn't the product of AI or a marketing campaign. It's the result of forgiveness, second chances, and a lot of people who once thought they were throwaways." She paused. Her eyes found Aiden standing below the stage, his hands clasped, gaze full of pride. Riley lowered the mic. Aiden stepped up. No script, no PR lines. He simply took her hand, oil stains and all, and held it tightly. "At first," he said, "I thought she was just a scrappy mechanic. Stubborn, difficult, and never followed the rules." Light laughter rippled through the crowd. Riley shot him a look. "But then I realized," he continued, voice deepening, "she was exactly what the system needed. Not because she could fix machines, but because she fixed something no one else had touched." He turned to her, holding her gaze. "My heart." No one laughed then. Only the sound of clapping, soft at first, then louder, until it swelled into a standing ovation. No one told them to stand. They just knew they had witnessed something real. Riley squeezed Aiden's hand, eyes misty. But these weren't tears of injustice. They were tears of release, because for the first time in her life, she no longer had to carry it all alone. After the ceremony, a boy around 8 tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Quinn," he asked shyly, "do you teach robot repair too?" Riley knelt despite her belly and smiled. "If you've got a pencil," she said, "we can get started." That night, after everyone had gone, Riley sat at the back of the workshop, one hand on her belly. Aiden sat beside her, his head resting gently on her shoulder. "What do you think our kid might inherit from you?" he asked. "Hopefully a stubborn head," she chuckled, "and a soft heart. And you?" What do you hope for? She thought for a long moment, then whispered, I hope they grow up in a world where they don't have to prove their worth with a grade sheet, but by how they treat people. Aiden nodded. And if they want to fix cars? She laughed. Then they'll have a whole garage. With their mom. Outside, the night wind rustled low-hanging trees. The prototype glimmered under moonlight, and on the hood of the car, engraved by hand, were the words, Made with mistakes, mended with love.